Here's my one-sentence thesis for today. Bambu Lab is the company that decided the enemy of desktop 3D printing wasn't slow speed or bad quality, it was friction, and then built a walled garden so smooth that a few million people happily moved in.
That's a generous framing, and I mostly agree with it, but a few million is doing a lot of work in that sentence, and we should say up front that some of the numbers floating around this company are either self-reported or in one case, completely detached from a reality.
Right, we'll get there. So today's profile, where Bambu came from, which is weirdly hard to source, the products that made it matter, who's actually steering it, and the two big storm clouds. One is a patent fight with Stratasys, the other is an open source community that went from adoring to furious in about a year.
And the big future question underneath all of it. Can a company whose entire moat is a closed ecosystem keep the trust of a hobbyist culture that was built on openness? Because those two things are in tension, and Bambu is, living right on the fault line.
So let's start at the beginning, except the beginning is the first surprise. When I went looking for the founding story, the clean origin narrative, there just isn't much there in the public record.
And I want to be honest about that rather than dramatic about it. We do not have a well-sourced founding date, a garage anecdote, here's the moment they quit their jobs story. The material we have is basically silent on it. That's a limitation, not a conspiracy, which is a little unusual, honestly. Most hardware companies love the founding myth. It's the thing you put on the about page. With Bambu, the thing that functions as the origin story isn't a person, it's a product, the X1 Carbon. The X1 Carbon is where the brand actually starts in the public mind. It's a Core XY style enclosed machine. That's the fast box frame layout where the print head moves in the X and Y directions while the bed drops down. And the pitch was high speed, multicolor, and it works out of the box.
And I want to be careful here because the enthusiast press said the X1 redefined expectations. And that phrase is marketing. It's not falsifiable. What is fair to say is that it raised the benchmark for speed and out-of-box quality in the consumer tier. And a lot of independent reviewers agreed on that.
Here's the part I'd actually flag. The X1 Carbon has recently been retired, and the company has publicly promised support until 2031, according to trade coverage of the retirement. Retiring your flagship a few years after it defined your brand is a fast cadence, and a support promise stretching to 2031 is a forward-looking commitment, not something they've delivered yet.
That's the thing a buyer should sit with. A support promise from a company that's 5-6 years old is a bet on that company still being around and still caring in 2031. Doesn't mean they won't honor it. It means it's a promise, and you should file it as one.
It's the classic consumer electronics anxiety, just applied to a machine you might depend on for a small business. The X1 got them in the door. What they did next is the more interesting stories.
So the lineage. The hard bit is not whether the newer models exist. Several have launched in a very tight window. It's keeping their roles straight enough that the range doesn't turn into alphabet soup.
Let me draw the line clearly because this matters. On the accessible end, there are the A1 and A1 Mini. In the middle, the P1S and P2S. Then the H2D, H2S, and H2C push into larger multifunction and multi-material territory. Those are all released products, not leak thread names.
The newest pair split the old flagship idea in two directions. The X2D is a compact dual extrusion machine, while the A2L takes the A series into large format printing at a lower price. Both launched this year, so the question is not whether they are real. It is how well they perform once more people have lived with them. The A2L is a good example of the distinction. Bambu launched it in June at $469 in the US, so it is on sale. But at only about 6 weeks old on this episode's date, it does not yet have the long-term field record of an A1 or P1S. Released is not the same as proven. So let's talk about what the real products actually changed. Take the A1 Mini. For a beginner, that machine plus the multicolor unit is the difference between I'll eventually learn to tune a printer and I clicked print and got a 4-color model. That's a genuinely different on-ramp.
The automatic multi-material system is the thing I'd point students to. Multicolor and multi-material used to mean manual filament swaps or fiddly hardware. You babysat Bambu productized it, so it's a default expectation now. That's real engineering, not just marketing gloss.
And on materials, one that's confirmed and interesting, they introduced a line aimed at indoor air quality. PLA Pure is the one I've seen, built around emission profiles. That's on their own filament page. For people printing in a bedroom or a classroom, air quality is a real concern, not a gimmick.
I'll take the material seriously and still ask the obvious question. Emission certified by whom? A curated house brand filament can be genuine quality control, and it can also be consumables, lock in with a nice story on the label. Often it's both. We'll come back to that when we talk about the moat. And the multifunction stuff, the H2D with laser and cutting capability, raises a question I don't have an answer to from our sources. Is that laser and cutting functionality safety certified in every market they sell into? Because desktop machine that also lasers things has a regulatory dimension that a plain FDM printer doesn't. FDM being fused deposition modeling, the melt plastic and stack it process most of these machines use. And yeah, bolting a laser onto a consumer device changes the compliance picture. I can't tell you the answer from what we've got, so I'll just flag it as an open question rather than assert it's fine.
Let's talk about who's steering this. The public face is CEO Ye Tao, and I'll be up front. Beyond him, the leadership picture in our sources is thin. We don't have a clean board roster or a deep bench of named executives. So we're mostly talking about one person's articulated vision.
And the vision is remarkably consistent, which I'll give him credit for. The framing across interviews is make advanced manufacturing accessible with minimal user effort. He's reportedly described one of the machines as the ultimate machine for lazy makers. That's a whole product philosophy in one phrase.
I actually love Lazy Maker as positioning because it's honest. Most people don't want to become printer mechanics. They want the object. But there's a flip side, right? Lazy Maker also means don't look behind the curtain, don't tinker, let us handle it. That's exactly the tension. Ease and control are trade-offs. Every automation decision that makes it easier for a beginner is a decision that takes a lever away from a power user. That philosophy is going to matter enormously when we get to the open source blow-up, because that fight is essentially about who controls the machine. Now, there's a claim attached to leadership that I need to stop and deal with, because it's in the brief and it's everywhere in the chatter. That Bambu is attracting a valuation near $100 billion, with interest from Tencent.
Yeah, no, I want to be really direct here. That number does not survive 30 seconds of scrutiny. The established public 3D printing companies, Stratasys, 3D Systems, are valued under $1 billion each. The $100 billion would be more than the entire additive manufacturing industry several times over.
So where does a number like that even come from?
Almost certainly a misread or a garbled figure that got repeated. Maybe someone confused a currency, maybe a rumor about a funding round got a couple extra zeros, but there's no credible sourcing behind it in anything we have. And when a claim is that far outside physical reality, the responsible move is to treat it as false until proven otherwise.
The Tencent interest piece I'd treat separately. Big Chinese tech investors taking interest in a fast-growing hardware company is plausible on its face. We just can't confirm it. And we definitely shouldn't let it ride on the back of that fantasy valuation. Right. Plausible that investors are circling. Not credible that the price tag is $100 billion. Keep those apart. And honestly, the fact that this number keeps getting repeated tells you something about how much hype fog surrounds this company right now. Okay, the moat. And this is where I think Bambu is genuinely, verifiably strong. It's just that the strength isn't a single breakthrough. It's the integration.
Correct. If you ask me, what's the one patent, the one process innovation, I couldn't hand you one. The moat is that the slicer, the cloud monitoring, the filament, and the model library all talk to each other and mostly just work. Let me unpack the pieces because the ecosystem word gets thrown around loosely. You've got Bambu Studio, their slicer. That's the software that turns a 3D model into the layer by layer instructions the printer follows. You've got cloud-based print monitoring, so you can watch and manage jobs remotely. You've got the house filament line, and you've got Maker World, which is their model repository and a library of ready-to-print designs. All of that is documented and public.
And the Maker World piece is the sneaky powerful one. Because a model library with a big active community is a network effect. Designers post there because that's where the users are, and users buy Bambu because that's where the good, verified, one-click prints are. Each side pulls the other in.
It is a network effect, and I'll flag that network effect is my analysis, not a measured fact, but the mechanism is real, and it's the same flywheel app stores use. The concern I'd raise is on the designer side. MakerWorld has a rewards system, and anytime creators start earning through a platform, you have to ask whether that creates a dependency that's hard to walk away from.
There are also partnerships that deepen the ecosystem. I've seen Helio Additive's simulation tools and a 3D printer OS integration referenced. I'll be honest that I can't verify the exact scope or status of those from what we have. They're mentioned. The fine print isn't.
So here's the practical translation for anyone deciding whether to buy in. The It Just Works experience is real, and it's worth money, especially if your time is worth more than your tinkering. But every one of those integrations is also a string tying you to Bambu. The curated filament, in particular, a lot of these machines read an RFID tag on the spool.
RFID being the little chip that tells the printer, this is Bambu PLA. Here's the temperature. Here's the color. Convenient. Also a soft nudge toward buying their spools.
Exactly. And I'd stop short of calling it hard lock-in because plenty of people run third-party filament on these machines fine. But it's a design choice that steers you toward the house brand. And then there's the data question nobody loves asking. Cloud monitoring means print data, and in some cases camera data, is going to Bambu servers. That's the cost of the convenience, and buyers should know they're paying it. And the sharpest version of that concern isn't hypothetical because they actually demonstrated the downside of a closed system when they restricted third-party cloud access. That's the moment the walled garden felt like a wall instead of a garden, and it's the hinge into everything else. It's the thing about a moat. The same wall that keeps competitors out also keeps your users in whether they like it or not. That's fine when everyone's happy. It's a liability the second they're not.
So where does that leave them competitively? Because the headline everyone repeats is that Bambu has overtaken Creality as the top-selling budget 3D printer brand, with over 1 million units shipped.
And I believe the direction of that. I just want to nail down what it does and doesn't mean. Multiple sources report the market shift. So the flow of new sales moving toward Bambu is well supported. The over 1 million units figure I can't tie to an audited report. No time frame, no methodology in what we have.
And top-selling budget brand. Budget by what definition? Units or revenue? Which geography? Those framing choices change the story a lot.
Here's the distinction I always make with students. Flow versus installed base. Bambu may be winning the flow, the machines being sold right now, but Creality has been shipping cheap printers for years. Their total installed base, the number of their machines sitting on desks worldwide, could still dwarf Bambu's, even if Bambu is winning this quarter's sales. Both things can be true, and Creality isn't standing still. They did a big IPO recently, so they've got capital to fight back. This isn't a settled kingdom. It's a company that grabbed the lead fast and now has to defend it. The reputational split is the interesting part of their position. Among mainstream buyers and small businesses, Bambu's reputation is strong, reliable, easy, gets results. Among the open source and tinkerer crowd, there's real wariness about the closed approach. Same company, two very different reputations, depending on who you ask.
They're also pushing into new places. A U.S. brick-and-mortar retail expansion and collaborations into creative verticals, like a design challenge with Insta360. That's a company trying to be a consumer brand, not just a niche maker tool.
And looming over the whole market position is the Stratasys patent lawsuit. That one's not rumor. It's confirmed in multiple sources. It's public record. Stratasys alleges patent infringement. And for a company betting on U.S. retail expansion, an IP fight in the U.S. is not a footnote. It's a potential handbrake.
Which brings us to the hard part of the episode, the turning points. 2026 has been rough on the reputation side, specifically the open source blow-up.
Let me lay it out carefully because the facts and the allegations need to stay separate. As reported across Maker Press, Bambu allegedly violated open source licenses and issued a cease and desist against an independent developer. The developer had restored cloud printing features to a fork of Orca Slicer, Orca Slicer being a popular community slicer.
So to put it in plain terms, a community developer built a version of the software that re-enabled functionality Bambu had walled off, and Bambu sent lawyers. To a hobbyist crowd that grew up on fork it, improve it, share it, that's close to a founding values violation.
And it escalated. The Software Freedom Conservancy, that's a nonprofit that enforces open source licenses, reportedly got involved, and prominent right to repair voices, Louis Rossmann notably, piled on. Yeah, I want to stress reportedly and allegedly throughout because the legal merits here are unadjudicated. Nobody's won a case. This is a reputational event, not a court finding.
There's genuinely a two-sided argument in here, though, right? Because one reading is company betrays open source. The other reading is company defends its own cloud API from being reverse engineered.
That's the real question underneath it, and I won't pretend it's obvious. If code was released under a license like the GPL and they didn't honor the terms, that's a genuine violation. If it's about someone hammering their private cloud infrastructure, a company defending, that is more defensible. From what we have, the community is alleging the former. I can't adjudicate it, but I can tell you which way the sentiment broke, and it broke against Bambu. And the deeper worry it exposes isn't legal, it's cultural. A company can win a licensing argument on the merits and still lose the trust of the exact community that seeded its early word of mouth. Enthusiasts were the free marketing engine. You don't want them making teardown videos about how to escape your ecosystem. My read is this is a growth outpacing maturity story. A 5-year-old company scaling this fast often hasn't built the legal and compliance and community relations muscle to match. The Stratasys suit and the Orca Slicer mess landing in the same window suggests the corporate machinery is straining to keep up with the hardware success.
And just to close the loop on that valuation rumor, it shows up again in the Turning Points reporting, that near 100 billion figure with 10-cent interest. Same debunk applies. It's not a turning point. It's noise. And repeating it uncritically actually undermines the credibility of the real reporting around it.
Which is a shame because the real turning points are dramatic enough on their own. You don't need a fake number when you've got a live patent suit and a genuine trust crisis with your base.
So, future watch. Let's separate the confirmed signals from the speculation, because this section is where everyone loves to fortune tell.
Confirmed-ish and worth tracking. The U.S. retail expansion is referenced across sources as a strategy, though I've not seen named partners or firm dates. The Stratasys litigation is real and ongoing, and there's a mention of a Shanghai court venue too, which I treat as unconfirmed detail until we see more. Those are the concrete prerequisite levers.
And the honest product question is no longer whether the A2L or X2D will ship. Both are already on the market. It is whether this faster, broader lineup creates clear choices for buyers or fragments support, accessories, and software attention. That is the test we cannot grade yet.
The one I'd watch hardest is whether the retail push is offense or defense. Moving into physical stores can mean we're conquering new customers, or it can mean direct-to-consumer growth is cooling and we need shelf space. Same move, opposite meanings. The financials would tell us, and we don't have them.
Then there's the trust repair question. There's a Let's Make It fund that's being framed as commitment to maker innovation. And I want to be fair to it and skeptical of it at the same time, right? A fund like that can be genuine ecosystem investment, or it can be a modest PR salve applied right after an open source backlash. The tell is in the details we don't have. How big is it? Who actually gets grants? And does it come with strings? Ask for the grant amounts and the recipient list. If those are vague, treat the fund as marketing. And the structural question that I don't think a fund fixes, can they repair the open source relationship without loosening the very ecosystem that makes them money? Because those pull in opposite directions. Opening up licensing or the API would rebuild goodwill and weaken the moat at the same time.
That's the whole company in one sentence. Their strategy is closed integration. Their community's values our openness. Every future move, retail, new products, the fund, the litigation response, is going to be read through that conflict. I don't think they can fully satisfy both camps, and watching which one they prioritize is the single most informative signal for the next year.
The IP piece is the wild card that could override all of it, though. If the Stratasys case forces design changes, or worst case, disrupts U.S. imports, then the retail expansion and the product roadmap get complicated fast. That's the low probability, high impact risk I'd keep an eye on.
Agreed. Unit sales are impressive, but units don't equal profit, and units definitely don't equal legal safety. A company can be winning the sales chart and still be one court ruling away from a very bad quarter.
So let's land it. Why does Bambu Lab matter? For me, it's this. They proved that the desktop market rewards ease over openness, at least at the point of sale. They took a hobby that demanded patience and made it demand a credit card. That's a real cultural shift, and legacy brands are scrambling to answer it.
And who should pay attention? If you're a beginner or a small business that just wants working parts, Bambu is probably the easiest on-ramp available, and that's a legitimate reason to buy one. If you value control, repairability, or you're allergic to vendor lock-in, go in with your eyes open, because the convenience and the leash are the same feature. And educators, honestly, a machine that just works is a gift in a classroom right up until the day the cloud policy changes and you're relearning your whole workflow. The two things I'd tell listeners not to repeat: that $100 billion valuation, which is fiction, and any precise user or unit count as gospel, because those are largely self-reported. Be as skeptical of the flattering numbers as the scary ones.
And the one open question to track: whether a company built on a closed ecosystem can win back an open source community it just alienated, without dismantling the very thing that made it dominant. That's the tightrope. Watch how they walk it.
Impressive and flawed at the same time. That's the fair verdict, and it's a more interesting company for being both.
That's Bambu Lab. Thanks for hanging out with us on Layer Lines Weekly. Keep your beds level and your expectations sourced. See you next week.